You will not control most of what happens next. Not the timing, not the outcomes, not the way people interpret you, not the weather of history that blows through your plans as if they were paper. The promise of this is not despair, it is clarity. In the next few minutes, you will learn how to separate what can be changed from what can only be met, and how that separation turns anxiety into steadiness and effort into something clean, focused, and strangely free. Not freedom from life's uncertainty, but freedom inside it. The first trap is that we confuse influence with ownership. We think that because we can affect an outcome, we must be able to secure it. And when the world refuses to sign that contract, we call it stress or bad luck or betrayal. The uncomfortable truth is simpler. Life does not resist you personally. It simply moves. If you listen closely, the Stoics sound less like teachers and more like survivors. One of them, a former slave, said that some things are up to us and some things are not. That line is often quoted as self-help, but it was originally a way to stay human under pressure. It is not a theory, it is a lifeline. Here is the first reversal. Control is not the ability to force reality to comply. Control is the ability to choose your response without needing reality's permission. Consider something ordinary. You send a message, careful and honest. Hours pass. No reply. In the space of that silence, the mind invents an entire courtroom. You prosecute yourself, you convict the other person, you rewrite the relationship. You call it intuition, but it is anxiety trying to become prophecy. The hard truth is that you cannot control the reply. The deep reflection is that you can control the story you tell while waiting. The practical move is to return to evidence. You sent what was true, you do not yet know what is happening on the other side, and your next action should be guided by your values, not by your fear. We think the mind is most alive when it is busy, but much of what we call thinking is simply an attempt to pre-feel pain so it will hurt less later. Yet rehearsed suffering does not buy immunity. It only steals attention from the present where your actual choices are. Another reversal arrives. The more you try to control your feelings by controlling the world, the more your feelings control you. Because every external dependency becomes a fragile thread. The weather changes, the market shifts, a person disappoints you, and the thread snaps. You were not weak. You were simply attached to a lever you did not own. Look at modern life. The calendar fills, the phone vibrates, the news scrolls. You can spend an entire day managing things and still feel powerless. Why? Because busyness is not agency. Agency is alignment. The hard truth is that much of your effort is spent negotiating with what cannot be negotiated. The reflection is that the self becomes calmer not when it gets more control, but when it stops asking control from the wrong places. The example is a work meeting where you try to be liked by everyone, anticipate every objection, preempt every misunderstanding. You walk out exhausted, not because the work was hard, but because you attempted to control other minds. The practical alternative is to speak with precision, listen with seriousness, and let the reception be what it is. Your task is to be clear and decent, not to be universally approved. A quieter fear sits beneath all this. The fear that if we stop controlling, we will become passive. But the Stoic point was never to surrender action. It was to purify action, to remove the hidden demand that the universe must reward you on schedule. Here is the reversal. Letting go of outcomes does not weaken effort. It strengthens it because it removes desperation. Desperation is the emotional tax you pay for trying to guarantee the future. Think of someone preparing for an important exam, or an interview, or a performance. If they measure their worth by the result, every practice session becomes a referendum on their identity. Anxiety rises, attention scatters, and the very performance they chase becomes harder to reach. The hard truth is that you cannot control the final verdict. The reflection is that you can control the quality of preparation and the dignity of your conduct. The practical step is to define success as what is actually yours. To show up, to study honestly, to rehearse deliberately, to rest, to be on time, to be present. If the result goes your way, accept it without arrogance. If it doesn't, accept it without self-erasure. Either way, you keep your center. This is where control becomes paradoxical. When you grasp for it externally, it slips. When you cultivate it internally, you stop needing it externally in order to function. And that is when your influence quietly grows, because people trust the person who is not trying to dominate the room. The next reversal is sharper. The desire for complete control is often a disguised refusal to accept mortality. Because control is not just about events, it is about time. We want guarantees that our efforts will not be wasted, that our love will not be lost, that our bodies will not break, that our names will be remembered. But no strategy abolishes impermanence. The hard truth is that loss is not a possibility, it is a feature. The reflection is that meaning does not come from securing permanence, it comes from choosing how to live within impermanence. The modern example is the way we archive everything. Photos, messages, metrics, as if evidence of a life could substitute for the experience of living it. The practical turn is to be present enough that you do not need constant proof later that you were here. If you're finding this line of thought useful, you're welcome to subscribe and leave a thoughtful comment about one area of life where you've been trying to control the uncontrollable. Not to confess, but to clarify. Now we move into the second part, where the question becomes more demanding. If you cannot control the world, what can you actually change reliably today? You can change what you aim at. You can change what you interpret. You can change what you practice. You can change the standard by which you judge a day as ruined or redeemed. These sound abstract until you feel how concrete they are in a moment of pressure. Here is the reversal. The most powerful form of control is not suppression. It is attention. Attention is the gatekeeper of experience. Whatever you feed it becomes your life for that hour. Take anxiety. People often treat it as a mysterious storm that arrives without cause. Yet anxiety is frequently a signal that you are mentally living in a place where you have no direct action. You are trying to control a future that is not here, or a person you cannot command, or a past you cannot rewrite. The hard truth is that anxiety thrives in imagined territory. The reflection is that peace is not the absence of problems, it is the refusal to abandon the present. The practical move is to ask, in plain language, what is the next right action that is actually mine? One email, one honest conversation, one walk, one boundary, 1 hour of focused work. Anxiety does not disappear because you told it to. It fades when you stop funding it with impossible tasks. Another reversal. Fear is not always the enemy of reason. Often, fear is reason, poorly informed. It is your mind trying to protect something you value, but using crude tools. If you listen with maturity, fear can point to a priority: health, reputation, belonging, competence. The hard truth is that fear will visit you regardless of your philosophy. The reflection is that courage is not a feeling. It is a decision about what matters more than comfort. The example is speaking up when a group is casually cruel, or refusing a shortcut that violates your integrity, or admitting you were wrong. The practical Stoic tool here is simple. Rehearse your principles, not your catastrophes. Decide in advance what kind of person you are trying to be, so that in the moment you are not negotiating with yourself. Failure, too, contains a hidden misunderstanding of control. We treat it as evidence of inadequacy rather than information about approach. We take one outcome and turn it into identity. Yet identity is built more by response than by result. Here's the reversal. Failure does not take away your worth. It reveals your attachment. It shows where your ego demanded certainty and where your effort needed refinement. Consider a creative project that does not land, a business idea that doesn't work, a relationship that ends. The hard truth is that you cannot control how the world receives your offering. The reflection is that your life is not a courtroom where each attempt is either acquittal or conviction. It is a workshop. The practical example is to study the attempt with clean eyes. What did I do well? What did I avoid? What would I change if I tried again? Then, crucially, to allow yourself to try again without calling it humiliation. The Stoics respected craftsmanship of the self, the steady return to practice. Pain forces the question even more. Pain laughs at the fantasy that control means comfort. And yet pain can also sharpen life into honesty. It removes the ornamental concerns and leaves the essential. The reversal here is quiet and severe. Pain is not always a detour from the path. Sometimes it is the path. Not because suffering is noble, but because it is unavoidable and therefore can be met with dignity. A modern example: illness, grief, betrayal, chronic stress that finally asks for change. The hard truth is that you cannot always prevent pain. The reflection is that you can decide whether pain will make you bitter or lucid. The practical move is to treat your response as your responsibility without treating yourself as guilty. Rest when rest is needed. Seek help when help is needed. Tell the truth sooner. Simplify. Protect what is essential. Pain often cannot be controlled, but it can be carried well or carried poorly. That difference is not small. It shapes character. So what can you change truly? You can change the way you speak to yourself when nobody is listening. You can change whether you turn every setback into self-contempt or into instruction. You can change whether you chase distractions or train attention. You can change whether you live by impulse or by principle. These are not glamorous changes, but they are real. And because they are real, they accumulate. Here is another reversal. Inner peace is not a retreat from ambition. It is the foundation for sane ambition. Without inner peace, ambition becomes hunger that cannot be fed. With inner peace, ambition becomes service to your craft, to your family, to your community, to whatever you hold sacred. Imagine two people with the same goals. One is obsessed with controlling impressions, outcomes, and timelines. The other controls preparation, honesty, and conduct. From the outside, both may look driven. Inside, one is constantly threatened by reality. The other is strengthened by it. The practical difference shows up in small moments. The second person can apologize without collapsing, can adapt without panicking, can wait without rotting in resentment. That is not passivity. That is strength. The control paradox is that the world becomes more workable when you stop demanding that it be controllable. Not because you give up, but because you finally stop fighting the terms of existence. You were never meant to run the universe. You were meant to run your own mind well enough to meet the universe with steadiness. If you take one idea with you, let it be this: you cannot choose what happens, but you can choose what it means you will become. And when life tightens its grip, when the plan breaks, when the phone stays silent, when the body hurts, when the future refuses to clarify, return to what is yours, as quietly as breath. Your attention, your judgment, your next action, your character. Because the only control that never has to be taken from someone else is the control that comes from within.